Good afternoon, everyone. Really excited to be presenting on this project today. It was a great project that we've been working on for the past year. So we've got some exciting findings to share with you today. But beyond this project, I really wanted to use this opportunity to go through the process as well that we followed, because this is a great example of a partnership between industry and research that's resulted in some really meaningful outcomes. So we'll make sure that we touch on those along the way as well. So exactly, probably almost to the day 1 year ago, we began pursuing this research partnership with Torex Gold Resources Incorporated. They're a Canadian mining company whose primary assets are located in Mexico. They've got a couple open pit mines, some underground operations, along with all of the processing plants and the related infrastructure down there. So over the course of the year, the project kind of evolved throughout the quarters. In the first quarter, we were really working on establishing this partnership and then linking it with a MyTax Accelerate grant, which we were granted at the end of the first quarter. In the second and the third, this is where we were really launching the project, conducting the study, collecting all of the data. And then in the final quarter of the year, we were able to move to a point of analysis and presentation of the results to the company. So despite the fact that this was conducted in the context of COVID, we were still able to ensure that we really prioritized that research approach that CROSH loves, which is a field to lab to field approach. And so beginning in the field, if you were at this conference last year, I was actually presenting on an internship that I had just completed with Torex, where we conducted an analysis of all of the health and safety accidents and incidents that had happened in their history. And from that, we identified that fatigue perhaps was an area of improvement that we could work towards. So what we did with this information is then we designed a study that could be implemented back in the field, but designed that in our laboratory, and then took it to Mexico and had some on-site contacts there really help engage with the on-site component of the study, which lasted a 69-day intervention period. So fatigue, of course, is not unique to Torex. This is an issue that mobile equipment operators and all individuals experience, especially those that have a lot of passive mental fatigue load with their daily tasks. So for operators, they're often driving along the same routes, they're doing really monotonous tasks, and they have that sedentary aspect to their workload. So this degree of fatigue, of course, can really impact one's ability to self-manage and mitigate fatigue in high-risk moments. So one strategy that we can use for detecting fatigue is the use of EEGs. And the wonderful thing is that with all this advancement in technology recently, there is now wearable versions of this tech that can be worn in the field. And what it does is it's assessing quantitatively your brain waves to determine if there is some slowing of the waves, which would be indicative of a growing level of drowsiness or fatigue. And then some of these devices actually have predictive capacities as well, where they're able to see if that load is increasing and then in real time give you feedback. And so one of the devices like that is called the SmartCap Life System. This is a wearable headband that you can see a little image of there, but it can also be worn in the underside of a hard hat. So really practical for in the field. And this is one of the ones that has that real-time capacity. So with an in-cab display unit, it can give the operator some audio and visual cues, letting them know if their level of drowsiness is increasing. For this device, they use level 3s, telling you that warning is happening, and then a level 4 would let you know that you were in a place of fatigue risk. So for this project, we really worked one-on-one with Torex to design some really key objectives for this study, but also that would support their broader occupational health and safety strategy. So we had three kind of main ones that were driven by some underlying key performance indicators or KPIs. So our first objective was really to see if this is something that the operators in the field would be accepting of. Would they accept it and would they use it correctly and as instructed? The second was to determine if it actually had the capacity to help reduce fatigue risk. And then the third was to look at their effectiveness at self-managing fatigue. So if it could be used as a training device to help someone connect with their inner fatigue level and know when they needed to self-manage accordingly. So process-wise, I wanted to highlight a couple of the things here. We really began this back at the beginning of the year with ensuring we were seeking ethics approval, of course, with Laurentian, but we also wanted to be in touch with the unions that were representing these employees in Mexico. Of course, there was language barriers involved here, so we really wanted to make sure that we had the buy-in from both the regional and the provincial territorial unions down there. This went through with participant recruitment. We had some translators on site that were able to assist with this component as well, as we weren't physically able to travel. We also engaged in a full risk management and a full change management proceedings with the company to ensure that the implementation of this device and the training and the full research package wasn't going to cause any risk in addition to the site. And then it was super collaborative with other members on location with things like the mobile equipment selection and installation process, getting all of the IT network set up for the data collection capturing. So a very collaborative project. We then had all of the training going on where we were getting that informed consent and making sure all questions were asked, as this technology was, of course, new to all of the operators. And then for data collection, we designed a really cool strategy with this. This site operates on a 10-10-10 schedule. So 10 day shifts, 10 night shifts, followed by 10 days off. And so what we were able to do is use those time blocks as 2 different periods. During the first period of time, we had the operators wearing these devices, but with no live feedback happening. So we were really just looking at the data that was happening with their fatigue and whether or not they were self-managing that accordingly. During the same period, 10-10-10, but the second time period, we then activated all the alerts and the alarms. So they had that audio and that visual coming into play. And so this really allowed us to have a comparison between the self-assessment or the self-management and to a period where they had real-time live feedback coming at them. So in addition to that, we also supported it with a pre and post questionnaire that we'll get to in the results that added some really great qualitative metrics to our data as well. So to the fun stuff, and now these are just a few high-level results that we've had from the study, but more to come in the manuscripts that are going to follow. But speaking to the first objective there, which was looking at that operator acceptance, so meaning they chose to engage in this study, but then once trained on the device, once given their assigned device and their assigned cab of the truck, did they choose to wear the device? And we base this off of the number of hours that they could have worn it based off of the shift schedule. And overall, we were about 46% on average for the amount of time they were choosing to wear it, with the highest ones being in the 79% region. And then we had some really low engagement at around 3% from other participants. We also looked at the operator acceptance and device usability from the standpoint of, was fatigue actually capable and what percentage of the time? And so factors that would have affected this would have been things like misuse of the device, not connecting it correctly between the cab and the band, perhaps poor fit. Everyone's head is uniquely shaped and sometimes the electrodes don't quite touch. We also know that mine sites can be very dusty. And so there perhaps is poor connection that can be caused from not using the hygienic wipes provided on the device. So we wanted to know that if given the training and given these devices and the tools to use them correctly, how usable were they to a novice participant? And so this ranged as well quite broadly, but about 77% on average, peaking at really high values of 97% usability, and then dropping a little bit lower to about 50% usability. So like I said, in addition to this quantitative data that we were getting from the device itself, we also had those questionnaires where we could really engage the operators in giving their true feedback on the experience. 9 out of 17 felt that it was quite positive. We had really good feedback on engagement with the training sessions, engagement with their responsive feedback to their supervisors, and feeling supported throughout the implementation. They also had a lot of critical comments, things related to the functionality of the device and disagreement between how they felt and what the device was saying. And then a lot for the comfort of as well of getting used to having that piece attached to your forehead for the day. So for objective 2, this is where we were looking at the actual reduction of fatigue risk, or just the identification of fatigue. And so for this one here, we were looking at things like just the quantity of alarms. So over the chart that you're seeing here, we were looking at the days in the shift cycle. So first day through 10 is day shifts, and then day 11 through 20 is night shifts. And we were just looking at the frequency of how many alarms were generally happening on these periods. As expected, day 10, 11, which would be the swing shift, we of course saw a peak in alarms on those 2 days. But then interestingly, the day shifts as a whole and the night shifts as a whole were about the same at 50 and 49, 50.7 and 49.3%. We were also able to look at the participants individually. And we did this because we wanted to see if there was any high risk trends that correlated with some of the other questionnaire data that we had. Things related to age, years of experience, previous knowledge of technology and wearable devices, and trying to connect the dots between those pieces. So we did have some individuals that tended to be higher risk in having those numbers of alarms. But I'd like to emphasize that this is really done from a coaching standpoint and at no point for penalty to those individuals. So it's strictly used so that a coaching program can be designed in a broader fatigue risk management strategy to help bring those individuals to a place where they can self-manage a little bit more often. The other chart you see on here was looking at the hours of the day. So starting at 0, going to 21 hours, and seeing if there was any peaks throughout the day. And of course, we're seeing there between 1 and 2 a.m. and then between kind of 8 and 9 a.m. as well, that we're having some peaks in the fatigue levels. Now, we didn't just want to look at the fatigue happening, but we wanted to look at their ability to change this with the implementation of the device. So this big long chart here is showing us the entire 69-day study period. And then across the bottom, it's showing you each crew as they came on to the shift schedule. So we've got crew 1, crew 2, crew 3, and so it's shifting over time. And now knowing that in between, around the center of this graph here, is where we would have the activation of the alarms coming into play. So as you can see, the majority of alarms happened at the front half, where they didn't have any of that live feedback happening and we're strictly relying on self-management. So that was great that we saw kind of a decrease in trend over time. All right, so the last little bit I'm going to share on the findings here was speaking to objective 3, which was effectiveness at self-managing. So here we're able to see that the ability of those level 3 warnings and their ability to prevent the level 4 progressions. So overall, we were quite satisfied with these values. You're looking for at least a 90%. And we were able to see that most of them were quite sufficiently able to self-manage when they had the activation of these alarms and alerts taking place to help them. Some individuals, I think there's 4 on there, that were able to perfectly. So never did they see a level 4 alarm during the entire duration of the study. They were always able to use those 3+ warnings and then engage in some type of management strategy, whether that was getting water, opening their window, taking a walk around their cab when it was safe to do so, and getting themselves more alert. So just to circle to some key deliverables that are coming of this project, we were able to produce a 3-chapter very detailed technical report that went to the industry partner, which was Torex. This talked about everything from the project design to development, all of the results, and then we're able to address some of the critical issues and recommendations for how this can help the company move forward. We also are authoring 2 manuscripts for peer review that are going to come from this that hopefully will be coming soon and that we'll be able to circulate to all of our CROSH partners. This presentation, of course, and then also a final report that gets circulated back to the funding partner, which was MyTax. So I'd like to just finish off by some acknowledgements, some thank yous. So for CROSH, Dr. Sandra Dorman, Dr. Dominic Gagnon, and Dr. Bruce Odson were the leadership team that supported this project and helped me along the way. MyTax, of course, for granting us the funds to support this project. And then with Torex, Nelson Bodnerchuk, who is the head of health, safety, and training. And then Dr. Hugo Castanda, who is the lead physician on the ground in Mexico that was very supportive of allowing us to conduct this study. Be happy to address any comments or questions that may have arisen.
Okay, Emily, there's a question for you here. What's more valuable, the live data or the big data?
The live data or the big data? So if I'm understanding correctly, the question is referring to, is it more valuable that the individual person is receiving live feedback about themselves, or is it more valuable that we have this wealth of data from multiple members on site? And I think the answer is that they're both extremely valuable, because having that in the moment capacity to alert somebody and prevent them from, going into a micro sleep state, that of course has very practical value and potential life-saving capacity in the moment. But the value of the big data is also huge, because when we can look at, although this was a smaller sample of participants, when we can look at them and then extract it to how it would affect the entire workforce and determine if this is a valuable investment and if it can be a really meaningful component of a fatigue risk management system, then the value there is endless as well. So
there is another, there is another question. Was there a concern that alerts from the smart cap would interfere with job performance or cause a distraction from working safely?
Sorry, so dry. That's a great question. And it's something that we really wanted to, wanted to address, because never did we want this to become a high risk endeavor, implementing it into the cab of the truck. And so that's part of why we engaged in the pre risk assessment in advance. And then we also asked that of these individuals in the post survey, did they find it distracting? Did they find it that it took away from their actual work? And they all said no. A big part of the training was that you never interact with the screen if it's not safe to do so. So if it's alerting, it can alert for 5 minutes if you are in a high risk task and you're not to interact with it. The other thing is that it's not a high pitch audio or visual. It's a very small screen. It's located at just below eyesight, and it was done so in an area based on the actual cab that it was installed into, of where it was a safe zone to implement it, where it wasn't going to cause distraction to the line of sight. Very good question.
There's one more question. Did you see an association with the number of level 4 alarms and hours of use? Were there participants with the most alarms wearing the device longer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're still in the midst of doing some of the data analysis that's going to look really closely at some of these relationships. But based off of what we've seen in the preliminary data, that actually wasn't the case. The individuals that had the highest percentage were not individuals with the highest usage hours. And so whether that's because they had other high risk factors related to perhaps their sleep history or other personal factors that have played in, or because they weren't using it often enough and therefore weren't used to the behavior of using it and weren't getting the same training value out of it, we have to explore that data a little bit further to get a complete answer. The second manuscript is entirely on the self-management component of it. And so we're going to be exploring that much deeper in there.